Well, you shared a little bit about you, so it's time for me to share a little bit about me. It's easy to lead with the successes, right? So in coaching, I've had success because my clients have had successes. I've had clients who've gone on to do extraordinary things. I've worked with Olympic athletes, I've worked with presidential candidates, I've worked with special forces operatives and serial entrepreneurs. I have a community of some of the top coaches on the planet called 4PC. I wrote a book that sold 40,000 copies pretty much by word of mouth alone, because it's a book about how you don't need to use marketing to build a small business with a few high-performing, high-fee clients. And whilst all of that is true, here's what's also true for me. There's a little boy who grew up just outside of London who felt the need to prove himself to his dad for much of his life. That need that I had to prove myself to my father had a positive impact. It meant I would push myself to be successful, and then I'd push myself beyond that to be more successful, and I'd push myself beyond that because I never give myself any credit for what I accomplish. I can get all sorts of acknowledgments from people around me, and it still feels like I'm feeling lazy on the inside. That little boy who was driven to prove himself to his father became a high achiever. That's me. I've been a high performer all my life in whichever field I've put my hands into. And it didn't come from a healthy place. And it was 3 years yesterday that my father passed away. Within days of him passing away, people were calling me, emailing me, messaging me, telling me how proud my father had been of me. And whilst I'd always got that intellectually, it hit me at a real visceral level that I'd spent my entire life trying to prove myself when I didn't need to. And I share this because I want you to know who is sitting in the seat in front of you. The drivers that pushed me to accomplish the things I've done, and where that was great and brought me successes, and where it didn't serve me and held me back and constrained me. And so here's the second thing about me. I've been driven to make a difference all my life. I've been very fortunate. I had a profession in the world of education before I became a coach, 15 years as a teacher. I made a difference to kids' lives in Africa, in inner city London, in Asia. I have kids, they're not kids anymore, people in their 30s now who I taught years ago who reach out to me and talk about the impact I had on their lives, and I'm proud of that. And as a coach, we're fortunate, right? We have a profession, we get to make a difference. And I get to work with high performers. One of my clients is raising $100 million right now to make a massive impact in people's futures. Again, it wasn't driven from a healthy place. I felt powerless as a kid. I felt powerless. I remember a moment sitting in my mum's car. I'm in the back seat, maybe 7 years old, and she's reversed out of our driveway, and a truck is reversing across the road towards us. And I sit there frozen. I can't say a thing. No words come out of my mouth. And I'm not just afraid for me, but I'm afraid for my mum. But I'm more than that. I'm frustrated because she's not saying anything either. Now, the truck hits us, and it wasn't far, so it just damaged the car. But that was the sense of my life, feeling powerless. I was 12 years old, first year of my high school in London, and I was in the school play. I loved drama, and it was my third or fourth, and the head teacher cast us in this play, but there were, from 11 to 16, it was an all-boys school, and he gave me a female role, which would have been mortifying anyway, but to make it worse, I still hate this play to this day because of this. It was A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, and he cast me in the role of Titania, who is Queen of the Fairies. It couldn't be anything worse for a 12-year-old boy in an all-boys school. And I went home and I cried to my parents, and I cried myself to sleep for day after day after day. And it hits me at a really deep level that I didn't know I could say no. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to play that character. I didn't want to have that role. And I couldn't say no. And, well, someone who's driven to make a difference in the world. It makes sense to me now, after lots of deep work and inner reflection, to realize that that drive to make a difference came from this sense of powerlessness. And thirdly and lastly, I was very lonely as a kid. I was in a talk recently where someone asked an audience of entrepreneurs, when did you first know you were different? And all the hands went up. They knew at 4 years old, at 7, at 12 years old, they knew from a young age they were different. That's what it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? You've got to be different. You think differently, you show up differently. I knew I was different from a young age. I just didn't know it was okay to be different. So I was very lonely. A lot of sensation, a lot of noise. It's too much for my system. I thought I was shy, but I wasn't really shy. I'm okay talking to people. I was just drained of energy being around a lot of people. There's a name for that. It's called being an introvert. And it describes what happens to me. To this day, if I go to a party, it drains me of energy. For the next 5 days after a party, all I want to do is stay at home, watch Netflix and read books. My wife goes to a party. She wants to go to another party that night. She's an extrovert. She gets energized by being around people. I thought there was something wrong with how I showed up. And one of the challenges is that extroverts always feel the need to convert you. They think there's something wrong and they need to help you. And this realization in the last few years that it's okay to be who I am. I wrote a book about how to build a practice of high-performing, high-fee clients, one conversation at a time, because I can only cope one conversation at a time. Look, you know you're an introvert when plans for an evening out get canceled and you're secretly relieved. You're an introvert when you're okay on stage at the front of the room or in the restroom. You're just not okay in the middle of the room making small talk. You might be a little bit more like me, or you might be a little bit more like my wife. But we can all be drained of energy at times in this profession when we're giving and serving. And being an exponential coach is about how to find a way to navigate that path in that noisy world out there. And so that's my story. The challenges that have led me on the path that I've been on today. Being lonely as a kid, it turns out that I've become really good at creating community. I've created a community of coaches who've read The Prosperous Coach, who've been to our intensives and stayed deeply connected. We have people who come to 3, 4, 5, 7 intensives in a row. We have a community of high-performing coaches called 4PC. And it turns out this little boy who was very lonely just needed his tribe. And it turns out he needed to create it.